Hi everyone, thanks for joining in today. I'm excited to have Pip McKay joining me. Welcome, Pip.
Thanks, Jackie. Lovely to be here.
And some of you might remember Pip has been our author for the day before, so great to have you back again.
It's always fun doing those posts, seeing, I think the questions and the comments and things are just always, it's always just really nice interacting.
Yeah, interacting with your readers.
It is, it's great.
And just a bit about Pip. So Pip loves the power of words, how they can stop us in our tracks to ponder or transport us to far off time and places. Her debut novel, The Telling Time, celebrates all this and more. Pip holds a master's in creative writing from the University of Auckland. While her travels through the former Yugoslavia informed The Telling Time, the connections formed within the local Croatian community while researching their immigrant story has been inspirational. The novel's opening won the 2020 First Pages Prize, judged by an international panel and New York Times best-selling author Sebastian Faulks. Croatian publishers, and I don't know if I can pronounce the name of the Croatian
Zananya.
Yeah. Brought translation rights, and I think I just saw, has it just been released in Croatian? Is that right?
About to be released. The beginning of June, and I'm going over to join them over there. Which is
exciting!
Really exciting. Really exciting.
And so just want to share my copy as well of The Telling Time, and I'm hoping I can share the beautiful tui on the cover, but it's sort of disappearing a little bit.
Yeah, it's going underneath.
There we go. If I move forward, it's better. So do you want to start off by telling us a bit about The Telling Time?
Yeah, it's my debut, and so it's sort of, I think in a debut you often sort of throw a lot of yourself into a book. The idea came when I was doing just a really introductory creative writing course, and I went along thinking this will be fun without an idea for a novel at all, and the tutor said, look, step yourself back over your life's timeline and there'll be something there that'll resonate. And I took myself back and then forward to 1989 when I was in my early 20s, and I was on a backpacking adventure, which, it's kind of a rite of passage often for Kiwis and Aussies. And my girlfriend and I got ourselves into a pretty tricky situation when we crossed the border into what was then the former Yugoslavia, into the Republic of Macedonia. And I kind of combined what I had experienced there and also with the country as a whole, because as a very green traveller, never been out of New Zealand before.
Yeah,
this was a country that really really stuck with me, and it still does, because there was a lot going on at that time. There was the political situation was challenging and changing. There was a high inflation, and when I went into Macedonia, it felt like I'd stepped back in time. So it felt like going into a socialist sort of country. And then when I reached Dubrovnik, in Croatia, it just totally stole my heart. And so there was things that I sort of pulled together, as well as sort of having met a number of, I call them Dali families through my school community, who were able to tell me stories about their immigration to New Zealand and what that involved and what it was like. And I've always really loved immigrant stories, really like what those cultures bring to the country they're moving to and what they take and how it affects the future generations. And that kind of was where I got the nugget. And I decided that I would bring a young Yugoslavian woman who lived on the island of Korčula. Her name would be Gabriella, because I like the name. She would come to New Zealand in the late 50s, but she would come holding a secret. And her daughter in the late 80s would make a similar trip to what I did to uncover her mother's secret. And that was kind of where I started. And then it just sort of went from there. I have to say it took me 6 years to get it from when I started to when it actually got published. So
And any family connections with Yugoslavia or?
Not my own. But I guess as a young girl, my family travelled around a lot in New Zealand. Now I know that it's in no way the same as an immigrant, but I did have an appreciation of what it was like to move and have to fit into a new community at different sort of stages of life and what have you. And particularly as I got into my teenage years, often that becomes more challenging because kids are less accepting. And so I sort of tried to transfer what I'd felt, and also by talking to friends about just what it had been like when, to come with the language isn't your own. This, and a lot of these women came out, and I learned, I learned different things about that group coming to New Zealand in terms of the proxy brides, and there was just so much that I gained in researching and talking to people and finding ideas that sort of really nourished what I knew. I don't have any Yugoslavian connections or Croatian, but I am known to some as Pipalai.
And this is your first book. What were you doing before you started writing this? And had it always been something you were thought of in the back of your mind that you wanted to do?
I never ever felt that I would have the tenacity or just even be able to write a book. I've always loved reading, but it always felt like a step too far. And I don't know what it was about this book. I think that the idea grabbed me. I think I've also always loved to write. I enjoyed a lot of letter writing, diary writing, and what have you. Always enjoyed writing stories as a kid, but there was just something about this story that just wouldn't let me go. And I think as I got further into it, I just sort of took on the challenge and wanted to learn how to write sort of better, which was why I ended up doing a master's in creative writing through Auckland University. But no, my background beforehand was in science and research, so quite methodical. But always funny that you should sort of say that, did you always like writing? I know my bosses, and when I was writing some of my scientific reports, they always felt that I was adding a few too many embellishments. So perhaps I was, it was something it's something I've always enjoyed. I've always enjoyed the written word, but no, I never ever thought that I would have a book in me, and they do say that everybody does.
So when you decided that that's what you wanted to do, was your first step to enroll for the course?
The first step was really that I hadn't been working full time for a while. I was sort of I've got 3 boys, and so I was sort of being mum to them, and my youngest was in his early teens, and the others had sort of they were still at home, but they were kind of in much less need of my attention and didn't really they were grunting and, not particularly sort of, communicative. So I just saw an opportunity to do something, and I actually was interested in joining up for a travel writing course. There was nothing at the time that was available, and I saw this creative writing course. Look, it was an 8-week course or a 6-week course, something like that. And I just thought, I'll just give it a go. And I didn't really think too much about it. As I said, I sort of got along to the course, and everyone else had an idea for a novel and I didn't. And so that's where it came from. And then I sort of worked on it for a few years part-time because I was doing another kind of, community role with Celiac New Zealand. And then when I had the opportunity, or I was very lucky, I think, to be accepted into that master's class, because there's only 12 accepted each year, that was a turning point. And it was then that I was working under Dr. Paula Morris, she really gave me the roadmap for how the story should be told. So she really liked the idea of the story, but she really sort of helped in giving me that framework. And then once I was away, then that was, you know, that was good. Of course, you know, people talk about about writing a novel. If I was to do another one, I would just get it out. And, you know, I was at that sort of stage of learning. I was trying to perfect things and what have you, which wasn't a bad thing. But I think that idea of getting your first draft out and then going back to rework it is probably a good way to go.
Yeah.
And this went through, I think, 3 drafts. Once I got to that final point, then went through 3 drafts. But, you know, I think it's, you know, I think the more drafts you can do, the better. You know?
Yeah. And are you working on something new at the moment? As a result of the book, I was asked by a company in New Zealand called Life Stories New Zealand to write family history. So they have people come along with a story, but they need somebody to kind of, you know, get that onto the page as a readable, you know, interesting sort of story. So I'm onto my second one of those books. That must be quite interesting.
And I really enjoy that. Like I enjoy, it involves quite a lot of research. It suits the fact that I like historical things. I love talking to people, so it's nice to sort of draw those stories out. And so that's what I'm doing. I mean, I think in terms of with another novel, I would not say that I'd never say never. And I think this particular book does call out for a sister book. And there are ideas mulling, but I want it to be like this one was, that the idea grabs me and just doesn't let me go. And feel that passion. You never know. I mean, when I'm over in Croatia in June, you never know what sort of inspiration might strike.
And we've got quite a few people watching, so just reminding the people watching, if you do have a question for Pip, please type it and I'll be able to read it out. A couple of questions we've got already. So Melissa wonders what drew you to Yugoslavia in your early travels.
Blind faith and just a little bit of gung-ho-ness. We'd ended up in Greece and we were trying to work out. We were 3 months into our backpacking and we're thinking, okay, where are we going to go now? And instead of crossing through the standard border, which would have taken us up to sort of one of the capital cities like Skopje, we saw that we could go through on this tiny little border up in northern Greece and up by the Albanian border. And we thought, oh, look, we're getting pretty good at this backpacking. Like this will be a bit interesting. And so we took this long train and we just sort of got ourselves into this place that hardly had any tourists. It was just one of those things where it was like it was sort of en route and we were interested to go there, but really it was sort of, we'd landed in Greece and we decided where to next. But I'm really, really pleased that I did go there. It was one of the countries that, as I said before, really stuck. And it was a country that, it was so different. And it was so different moving through the country. And it's not difficult for me to see now why there was the tension that sort of then exploded into the civil war between those different republics, because they were so different. And going from one to the other, it had a different feel. Like from going from Macedonia to Croatia to Dubrovnik, it felt like I'd stepped into a different world, into a different time zone.
And Jill wonders what you like to read yourself, and I'm wondering if maybe there is something you've read lately you could recommend to us.
I think I was thinking back to what I've read lately, which is actually like quite an eclectic sort of mix, which is interesting. I am a member of a book club in Auckland too, so and this year in particular we've decided to try and read different genres, so that is partly it, but some of these are my own choices. the one that I've probably enjoyed the most, and it's an historical novel, is The Lincoln Highway by Amor Towles.
Okay.
And
I've heard about that one.
He wrote Rules of Civility, which I
Mm.
really loved, and he also wrote The Gentleman in Moscow.
Oh, okay, yep, that's
I loved The Lincoln
Mm.
Highway.
Mm.
I just thought it was fantastically written. So I try to read books that are inspirational for me as a writer. But then, like, the one that I've read just recently is kind of like a woman's fiction book, and I wrote it down because it's got quite a long title, and it's called Erotic Stories for Punjabi Widows.
Okay.
Now, it's a Reese's book club pick. It probably sounds more sort of like way out there than what the title, what the title sort of suggests. It maybe, be a bit more way out there. It was probably, I mean, as a writer, I felt it was quite hurriedly written, but I felt that the actual concept and some of the themes that came through were really cool. And every book I read, I take something out of. What else have I read? The Mirror Book by Charlotte Grimshaw. So that's a memoir of a New Zealand writer, quite a literary family. So that was really interesting, really well written. And Mornings in Yenin is another one that I've read recently. So yeah. But yeah, I mean, I personally do enjoy historical novels, and I do like women's fiction. I like books that make me think about issues that I can relate to.
And do you have an author you'd say that inspires you?
Oh, actually, well, I suppose there's a number. I mean, I really love Kristen Hanna. I like her books, but I sort of also think, okay, they start getting a bit formulaic as well. New Zealand author, I've read one recently by Sue Orr, and I really, really, really liked her writing. And I guess one that I thought that was kind of like The Telling Time was Victoria Hislop's book, The Island.
Okay.
When I read that, I felt that was, when I read her book when I was writing mine, and I thought, if I can write something similar to this, that would be, But yeah, I mean, I like anyone that can write well, Amor Towles, I mean, male, female, doesn't matter. Sebastian, folks,
No, great recommendations. We always love getting more recommendations. I've got a couple of people with similar, Melissa and Jill. Melissa wonders how you came up with the title, and Jill wonders about your cover. I just want to show it to people again because I don't know.
Really hard to see it. It's because it's behind your.
There we go. I think we've got it now.
I'll try and hold it up from here.
Oh yeah, you've got your one there as well.
Mine's an old tatty one now.
So people who aren't from New Zealand might not be aware of the name of the bird on the front. So the tui bird. I'd have to say it's one of the great native New Zealand birds. Has a lovely sound, and so can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, well, the title came before the cover and the idea for the cover, so I'll start there. Basically, the title, I had to come up with a title during our master's course, because for our thesis we had to hand in part of the novel. So it wasn't the full novel, but it was about a third of a novel that I had to hand in at the end of the year. So I was just mulling around with ideas. I've always quite liked alliteration. So the TTT thing kind of, I was sort of thinking about that. And then I mean, the book is about family secrets, and but it's also about telling times. It's about like where it's set. As Croatia or Yugoslavia was coming out of World War II, they were pretty telling times. There's some topics sort of through the book that sort of linked to fairly telling times for women. So, I was using that. Certainly Gabriella's sort of, coming to New Zealand as a new immigrant. It's tough.
Yeah.
So, but really and that telling time is probably, it made me think about sometimes there's secrets and you can hold on to them for years and years, but sometimes it's time to tell, you know, and it's a good time to tell, and there's a lot that can be gained from that. So weirdly, I sort of thought about lots and lots of different ones, and then I just came up with that, and Paula Morris said, "That's great, I love it." And that was what I put on my master's thesis. It sat there, and it wasn't until I actually saw it on the cover that I thought, oh my God, you know, that works. And in terms of the cover, that's another lovely story that I had just met randomly a woman when I was down we've got a place down at Pauanui, which is a beach resort. And we were on holiday, and I met a woman walking. Well, I was out walking, we got chatting, and we got on quite well, and she was new to Auckland, and so I made an effort to sort of say, okay, well, I'll contact you. Well, it turned out that Catherine, as well as being a great nurse, she is an artist, and I liked her art, and I just said to her randomly one day, what would you think about painting a canvas that I could use on a book? And she said, oh, look, I'd love to. She'd never, ever done anything like that before, really? But we just kind of worked it out. And I chose the tui because, as you said, Jackie, it's quite an iconic New Zealand bird. A beautiful songbird with beautiful colours, and it is mentioned in the book. It's a book that a bird that Gabriella notices. And the persimmon tree is also used thematically, particularly with Gabriella, sort of to mark that first year that she's in New Zealand in terms of the seasons. And you know, it's a tree that does also grow in Croatia. But there's a confusion in the book that it's sort of she knows a pomegranate tree, and it's similar to a persimmon tree. So that was where that came from. And then Catherine had the idea of overlaying it over a map, and it's not immediately obvious when you look at the book's cover, but that area of land, or that could be taken for cloud, is actually the Croatian coastline, and just above the T is the island of Korčula. That's where that came from. You know, just that the blues seem to me to really relate to the whole, you know, Croatian Mediterranean sort of thing. So and
you must have been so pleased when you saw it as well.
Oh, honestly, like you can imagine what it was like when I said to her, and I thought, oh my God, what have I done? But she sort of came up with the idea, or, you know, the concept of the canvas, and I just saw it and I thought, that's just going to be great. I love it, because I love orange. You know, it's one of my favorite colors, and yeah, she's just such a clever painter, and I think it just, with the oil, I think it just gives it a lovely depth. And there are a lot of booksellers, and you know, because it through New Zealand, it's distributed to bookstores and things like that, and it just had the number of booksellers that said to me, oh, this is just such a beautiful cover. It's a really lovely book to sell because it's eye-catching. It was great. It's just been perfect. Been so lucky.
No, it is beautiful.
And the Croatian cover that the Zananja people have come up, I've shared that on social media today. That is also beautiful, and they've taken a similar feel, and they've used bougainvillea and the sea and sort of the palms in New Zealand, and the, you know, sort of a little bit of the terracotta and the, you know, that Italian sort of feel in with the buildings, and it's stunning. So
And you said you're going back. Are you going back to Croatia for the launch?
Yes.
Is that your first time going back since you were originally?
No, so I was there in 1989, and when I was writing the book, I hadn't actually. I chose Korčula because I could see from Google and a bit of research that it had similar architecture to Dubrovnik, but I hadn't been there. But I wanted Gabriella to come from a small island, rather than from, say, Dubrovnik. So I could sort of see, but I'd never visited it before. And I was lucky to have the chance to travel to Croatia in 2016. And I visited Korčula then, took a lot of photos and had a good look around. It's certainly the first time I've been back to Zagreb since 1989. So I'm really looking forward. That's where the publishing house is based, and they have the most beautiful bookstore associated with their, the publisher has their own bookstore right in the centre of Zagreb. So it's going to be lovely. I'm going to do a book event there, and, they'll have a translator and, do the usual book signing and interview and things like that. Really looking forward to it.
Yeah, it must be very, very exciting.
Oh, it's so special.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like a dream come true.
Yeah. No, that's great. Well, thanks so much for talking to me. It's been great chatting to you. Do you want to let people watching know how they can keep in touch with you?
Yeah, I mean, probably the best way is just to go and check out my Facebook page, which is under PJ McKay, NZ Author, or otherwise my website, www.pjmckayauthor.com, and then all the links and things are there, and you can just sort of, see what you want. There's plenty of info, and but love you to check me out. Amazon, it's on, the book's on Amazon. Audiobook is out, So
well, thanks so much, and also thanks to everyone who joined in and asked some questions.
Thanks for all the questions.
Thanks. Bye, everybody.
Thanks, Jackie. Bye.